I'm supposed to go. Yes, all right, I'm sorry. I missed that part because I was, all right, hello. Uh, All right, we'll call the meeting to order, and I have to request if anybody has any pecuniary interest to declare at this point. Anybody at all? All right, none being declared. We're next on to the agenda. Are there any amendments, or can we move to approve it? All right, could we have a motion to approve the agenda? That's, and we've got a seconder. Did you get that, agenda? All right. And moving on then, I guess the acceptance of the minutes. The minutes have been circulated. I hope everybody's had a chance to read them. If so, can we have a motion that the minutes of the meeting of December 18th may be approved and signed? Well, I haven't signed it yet, but I will. Paul is moving, seconded. All right, Fern. All right, thank you very much. All in favor? Thank you. All right, we're moving on to reports, and I think turning it over to Angela.
So I'll just take a brief moment to introduce the report, and then I'm going to turn over the conversation to Angela. So since your last meeting, the staff internal team, who are all on the line today, so Grant, Sarah, Stephanie, Andre, and Kelly are on the line to help in any way that we may see fit. At our committee meetings, we also had representatives from facilities, being Ray Cousineau and I believe Jason Silcock was there at certain points in time. So as much as the committee's been doing your work to go see what a community hub may look like out in the real world, staff have been working with the uses that the committee blessed last time to understand the typical space that would take up in a building, and realizing very quickly that not all of it could fit possibly in one building, being across the street at 14 Church Street. So we've spent a lot of time working with Angela as well as A-Link to develop this nice chart that you see in your package of what we think could reasonably fit into 14 Church Street. So that's a little bit different than the scope of the committee. The scope of the committee had talked about being 5 James Street as well. But what we realized very early on is that it's difficult to make decisions about what's going to happen at 5 James Street until we know what's going to happen at 14 Church. And we know that 14 Church really is the focus of everybody in the community. So that's where we've looked. So this chart that you see here today, it's been vetted through our staff, I think through 2 or 3 meetings anyways, and then Angela's gone back and had specific and individual meetings with some of the department heads as well to understand their space needs. So what we'd like out of today is to get the committee's input on what you see in front of you in terms of the space needs analysis. It's that space needs analysis that, once blessed by the committee, will then go to council for review and approval. And once reviewed and approved, that's when we'll have A-Link start doing the conceptual design of the building. That may be slightly confusing because what you'll see in front of you in your package is also this, what looks to be concept designs. Councillor Pridham and I had a conversation about this yesterday, and forgive me, Councillor Pridham, if I say something out of turn, but what I would say is don't get emotionally attached to anything you see on these pieces of paper. In no way do they represent the final design of the building. My staff haven't even really seen this or talked about it because we just received it on Friday. Really what we wanted to try and give you was something as a frame of reference, because when you look at this chart and you say something like a gallery is going to take up 650 square feet in 14 Church Street, it's hard to visualize how much space that actually takes up. So that's why we wanted to show it this way, so that you can see that, okay, that's really what 650 square feet would look like over there. As we move forward in the project, as we get this chart sorted out, really the next heavy lifting of staff and the committee will be working through to get ourselves to a concept design that we can get council to approve, and then have A-Link price out. Assuming the committee gets themselves to a point today where you feel like you can recommend a space needs analysis, what we would do is clean it up in any sort of way that we may need to, and then take it to council on March 18th, which is their SPC committee. So it's a committee during the day. However, if there are significant changes to this chart, we will need to take it back to A-Link and to Angela as well, and it just may delay our process with council. So that's kind of the frame setting for what we'd like to accomplish in the meeting, but Angela's here because she's done far more work on this than I have, and she has an excellent memo attached to my report, and I really would like for her to lead the conversation.
Thank you. So yeah, I do want to reiterate the fact that this chart, or the concept plan, we don't want to worry about individual spaces. We don't want to worry about where washrooms are located or stairways or any of those kind of things. It really is just to give us a visual idea of how much space things take up. We'll get to where things might be located later. This is not a design document. It's a concept space planning document. So just so that, we're all kind of on the same page with that. So we don't want to spend a lot of time, saying that this should be here, that should be there, why is that wall there, or those kind of questions. It's really just to give us a visual picture of, as Brent said, how much room different types of space take up. So I think we can start by, everyone's had a chance to look at the space needs analysis document, I assume. What we're doing is looking at the column that I have highlighted in, so it's got a yellow highlight at the top with draft revised area. Next to that, the column to the left, is the area that kind of came up after our needs assessment the first time, the numbers we gave to the architect, and then they kind of worked on, and then we've kind of further massaged those to come up with space that fits the actual square footage we have. Because if you go down the document to the bottom, you can see that originally we needed way more space than we had for everything that we wanted, and that's not going to work. So what we've done is come up with, we've come up with a list of spaces that fit into the actual square footage we have. And then one of the things that has come out of various discussions is that originally we had a lot of the little spaces like reception area, the gift shop, different things all as separate individual spaces. And we've kind of, through conversations, it's been recommended that those become more of a one open space that can be used then as, instead of having a common community gathering space and, say, a multi-purpose space and a bunch of corridors and a bunch of individual spaces, they can all be kind of brought into one to give us potentially more space that has more flexibility and usage. So I think the best thing to do is just, you've all had a chance to look at this. If you've got any initial comments, suggestions, red flags, ideas, changes, I'd like to, the point of this is to open it up to you as a committee to have input into what this looks like and where we are right now. You have to hit the red.
I went through it all. To me, it looks very good. I have a couple of minor little questions on the notes that are on this chart. Is this a time to raise them? Is this the time? Okay. So first off, the under the art gallery, the description or notes, the very last note that you need 2 exits if you're going to exceed 60 people. Is that not shown on the diagram?
Yes, on the diagram, he did show 2 exits. So he has, and again, we're not really too worried about the diagram at this point, but yes, they have accommodated 2 exits on the diagram. Yeah.
Any square footage would accommodate that with by regulation?
Yeah. Yes, yes.
Again, maybe I'm getting too into the weeds.
No, but I think it's still good.
Also in, I believe it was the report that accompanied the chart, mention of the market. I thought at the last meeting, market space / store space. Is the intention, has it moved back to, because I thought that we had said at the last meeting we were going to look at the PMC to continue being the market, or maybe I'm wrong.
I think where we left it is that we weren't going to have, the way I understood it, sort of rental market space, but we were going to still allow some sort of potential gift shop space that the library could use, the gallery could potentially use, maybe if the town wanted to get into branded merchandise, just a small little retail space that would be adjacent as part of this space. So. No.
Okay.
It's referring to more of a internal little gift shop type thing. Because I think one of the things that was discussed, and Sarah can correct me if I'm wrong because she's on the call, is that as the Friends of the Library age and the Friends of the Library sale becomes more cumbersome, maybe having a space where books could be sold, Friends of the Library books could be sold on an ongoing basis. And then if the gallery was to move to 14 Church, right now they do have a little gift shop, so being able to continue to have some sort of retail earned revenue stream for kind of all parties concerned was sort of in the plans.
Note or question, again, in the report, I believe I saw that an estimate of the library activities that would need access to Church Street being 10-ish, 11-ish, was it, starting in the morning? And I'm just wondering if on the first floor diagram, we see the main entrance with the vestibule and the two other, I guess, emergency exits from the stairwells. Is there any thought to having a secondary entrance for people that might be using the office spaces? Or would the intention be that you would, if I'm going in there at 8:30 in the morning to get to my office or an office that I've reserved, would the intention be to go through the main entrance where the vestibule is? Or might it be a thought to take the exit to the, I guess that's north end of it? Or the other one for access for office staff. So we're not sort of, or whoever's going in first thing in the morning isn't perhaps having to explain to people like a business entrance, if you will.
I think, again, we hadn't sort of gotten into that level of granular detail, but I think that's a good comment to note as we're sort of moving forward, that there might be need for access separate to that. I mean, the building's not that big, right? So, if you were, I mean, I would sort of assume that if you're going into the building at 8:30 in the morning to your office, there's probably nothing else going on. You could, card swipe, whatever, to get in the building, go up to your office, and you'd be fine. I mean, I think that's a note we can make is, do we want an extra, secondary staff entrance at another location? I mean, I think that one of the comments that those of us who were at the tour of Idea Exchange made, and I don't think we would have that same issue here because it's a different building, but that they have had problems where their front entrance wasn't working for whatever reason due to the cold, and staff was able to go in through another entrance, right? So I think that's kind of like a design consideration down the road. It's not something that, because again, these are just concepts, so we don't really know exactly where things are going to be placed, but I think it's a nice thing to note, to be on the table for consideration as we move forward. So thank you.
My only other thought is, I do note that we are doing some renovations to the front entrance. In all likelihood, the old doors will go, I assume. I'm just want to suggest, and maybe it's too early for this as well, but that the facade, right now, to me, it's very nondescript, the main entrance, and anything that can be done to make it a more welcoming facade would be, I think, beneficial.
And again, I think that's a really great comment and suggestion. And again, we're not at the design stage yet, but I think, like I'm sort of speaking out of turn here, but I think typically when you are doing historic building renovations, you do try and make the entrances and exits look as in keeping with the building as you can. But you also have to have practicality, like they're going to probably have to be accessible doors, and having beautiful carved wooden original doors and making them accessible is possible but more difficult, right? So, and it would definitely add to the cost of the building to do that versus getting standard accessible, like standard building accessible doors. Again, Grant could probably speak to that if I'm sort of speaking out of turn. But I think that's, again, a design thing that's good to note at this time, but we're not kind of at that, we're not doing design type decisions now, but I think all this feedback's good because it's things we can note for when we get to the design stage. We've got them recorded, so it's really helpful. So that's great, yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Is that working? So I'm sorry, I was away last week, so I haven't had as much chance to really review this as I'd like. But I am concerned about just taking off the table altogether, moving the library's teen collection. You've seen the library, there's not, like, we can't put any collection on the second floor of the library because of the building constraints there. It can't support it. There's not enough room as it is, so this doesn't really help alleviate the concerns the library have of not being able to have a decent collection. And I just wonder, it seems a pretty kind of conclusory statement that there would be security and operational logistics. If it's the teen collection, you don't have to worry about, you know, like they can come in independently, it brings them in. You already have that community social gathering space. It's not a huge collection, but it takes a little bit of pressure off the main library building. I don't know what the security concerns would be. And you're already, you know, you have staff at reception, they have a sight line. I don't see how that's any much different than having a kiosk, but a kiosk doesn't really allow, like, it doesn't help the library with the space constraints. And there's already been a very extensive space and need study for the library that says that they need more space for the collection. So I'm just wondering why that was just that was taken off the table, and wondering if that could be considered bringing back onto the table and putting in that community space, gathering space. There's a lot of meeting rooms, and a lot of those meeting rooms are going to be empty a lot of the time. Like, I just see this as a building with a lot of big spaces. I mean, the gallery space, it's great. It's a really big space, but it's just a space that people come in and look around and then leave, whereas, you know, having books there, like, that keeps people there. It keeps people in the space. So that, and maybe considering a few more smaller meeting rooms upstairs for things like when we have tutors that need to come in and have a private space to meet, as far as our literacy programs and things like that for the library. So those were my initial thoughts.
So I think that we spent a considerable amount of time at the staff level talking about the collections moving to 14 Church. And I think there was issues with, you know, staffing for just checking out books. I mean, there was just sort of logistical issues that came up with that. I think the way we left it at our last staff meeting is that those of us, again, that went to Idea Exchange saw how they did have kind of some areas where they had kind of moving, I don't call it carousels for lack of a better word, but moving stands that did have books on them and that were available to be checked out by the reception people there. So I think that the way we kind of left it is that we weren't going to have a dedicated library space in the building for the teen collection, but that possibly that could be incorporated in different spaces when we're looking more at the actual space planning and programming. Did I get that kind of right? Sarah?
Thank you, Angela. Yeah, I think the line in the chart would better reflect the conversation if we took the kiosk sentence out, because I think that is where we had our discussion. And I think we had ended up saying we were going to just moving forward, consider as the design was laid out, if there was room for teen collection specifically to be on movable shelving. So you're correct.
And then in terms of the meeting spaces upstairs, they were designed to be flexible so that they could be used for small groups or individual studying or whatever. So they haven't been defined as to what they'd actually be used for, and that's why they're kind of 2 to 4 person spaces, so that they could be individual study spaces if needed, or it could be for small meetings or for offices, or kind of a multi-purpose space. Does that help, Barbara?
It does, but when I look, and again, perhaps I shouldn't be looking at the diagram because I know that's can be a little distracting. But, you know, we only have one small meeting space for 4 people, and then we have one for 8 people and one for 6 people. And I'm thinking maybe it would be helpful to have a few more smaller rooms since we have bigger spaces below.
Yes. And I think that if we're looking at the chart, the diagram again, there are the 3 small spaces on the, I guess that'd be the west side. that are, 80 square feet, which is, if you look at the chart again, we had designated 3 small spaces at about 80 or 90 square feet. So,
Well, and, yeah, I'll do my best to explain that. Like, think of them as future offices. So, again, this conversation that Councillor Pridham and I had yesterday is that, like, one of my vested interests in this project was that at some point in time, we are gonna outgrow, the corporation's gonna outgrow the available space we have at Town Hall and or at the MOC. I will have to, let's say if I was here for 20 more years, I will have to find a space to seat staff. We've purchased this building across the street. I doubt council's gonna, the day is gonna really wanna build a new administration building. So what I would like to see in this building to get us for future readiness is to have spaces that are easily transitioned into office spaces to use. I have no people to put in these 3 offices or 4 offices or 5 offices or whatever we end up at the end of the day today. So early on in the project, or early on in the, say, the first 10 to 15 years of the life of this building, these spaces could be used for something else. That's, at least that's my own personal thought.
and again, when we're looking at the diagram, what they've done is they've just taken some of the sizes of the spaces that we've kind of indicated as possibilities and put them into a drawing so that we can sort of visualize what does a 700 square foot meeting space look like in comparison to an 80 square foot meeting space. So again, we're not really worried about the diagram right now. It's more the list of spaces we have here, and are we is our space needs, the list of spaces, correct, or do we need, more small spaces and less big spaces? Or are we missing something on this list? And that's why, your comments are really helpful in that way, because it kind of helps clarify how we describe the spaces and what we keep on the list. So, so what I'm gathering is that what you're asking for is that we need more smaller spaces that people can work in?
I think so. I mean, I just work in a building where we have a lot of meeting rooms, and they're empty a lot of the time. So if we can have smaller ones, I mean, a variety of sizes, I think that would be helpful. And I mean, it may be that the library, this may just be a stopgap for the library as well. But yeah, I like Sarah's suggestion of, instead of saying kiosk, saying the movable shelves. I didn't get a chance to go to Cambridge, but I mean, I think we want to keep that possibility open, because there's not much reason for teenagers to come to that building right now. They're probably not going to want to spend a lot of time in the art gallery. But the maker space will be a draw. And then I think also if we have books there, that would be a draw as well.
The place in Cambridge, Barb, they were very proud of the fact that they were the first bookless library, which I think sounds awful. But anyway, so they had no problem with drawing visitors with very few books, a few children's books, but that was all. I don't think we should do that, but that was their point.
I think we find people are still reading books. So even, I mean, I think we need to have everything, right? Like, so we need to have maker spaces, we need to have books, we need to have online access, we need to have, make sure there's good Wi-Fi so people can connect their devices when they're there and use their devices. I just worry about having a lot of big spaces without really thinking about how are we going to use those spaces.
Thank you. Mary, you had a comment?
Not really, but this is, I guess, partly design, but on the same time, I think as we consider the use of those buildings, if some of the windows are going to be opened up, I think that makes a difference for the use of the building. I think you would have different uses for a building that has a lot of natural light and access to kind of seeing what things are happening outside. And it will also really improve the appearance of the facade once there are windows with something interesting in them. That was all.
And again, I think that was part of the desire for everybody, is to bring as much natural light into the building as possible. So, but we'll make sure that that's noted, yeah.
Sorry? Hello, Fern.
Thank
Thank you. We talked about this, but there are two stairwells, and they are 27 feet apart. And I understand it's maybe for capacity, but one stairwell that's wider, that can accommodate more people ascending or descending if as necessary, might be, open up some more space. And maybe you had mentioned sprinklers might influence that too, but I just want to make note that, hopefully we don't have to have two stairways and one of them right where we have the opportunity for windows. The other thing I'm looking at is the meeting space, and I understand the need for smaller meeting space for more individual, work. But we've got a table for what would be accommodate 8, and then another one for 6, and then another one for 4. So kind of your comments. Wouldn't 1 for 8 be enough? And if there were 6 people, they could book the one room that has 8 instead of having a 6 and an 8 and a 4. Couldn't they just use the same space? Because how many times really are we going to be booking those spaces for large numbers of people at the same time on the same evening?
I think that's a really good point. And again, this list came out of like all the different needs that have been expressed over the course of the time. So again, I think that's something, if we don't think that we need these different spaces for different, that we can make them more multi-purpose. That does make sense. It does free up space, more space for programming or whatever we want to do, right? I think it was again to accommodate the need for some study space, the need for some small group meeting space, the need for potential municipal offices down the road. We're trying to, again, I think as Brent sort of, prefaced this, is that there's way more things that were expressed on the list of things we want than we have space for. So we need to decide the priorities of what spaces do we want to, what spaces are sort of sacred that we definitely want, and what spaces are more that we don't need this, or maybe we need to tweak this, or maybe we don't want, 180 square foot space for 10 to 15 people. We'd rather have 2 more smaller spaces that could be used for individual study or could be used for offices down the road. And I think that's what we're trying to do today, is kind of go through the list and sort of identify those things that seem like they're redundant, or there's too much, or there's not enough of, or that we want changed, so that we can then take this list and take it to council so that they can have the same discussion that we're having. And then we eventually have a list that we can actually give to the architects so they can do some design concepts that actually are more realistic to what we are eventually. And then we'll come back and look at the designs and sort of go, oh, well, we don't actually like the way the staircase is placed, right? So.
Just further comments, if that's okay. Right on. I like the idea of the open reception on the main floor, but also something like that on the second floor, so that people that are working in the makerspace are always available instead of tucked in a room and not always accessible by the people that might be using that space. And I'm going to mention the adult learning classroom and such. So that, to me, is a big room that could be very much a multi-purpose room. Adult learning would use it at times if they ever have a classroom size that's that big, and I don't know that they do. I think it's maybe more one-on-one or 1 with 2, but I'm not the authority on that. So, and that looks like, is it some sort of a technology space as well? Whoops. And if it's a technology space, isn't technology very portable now, that you just have a laptop and you book it out and it's wired up and you can sit basically anywhere to do your thing? But that would be a quiet space to do that. But I'm thinking that makes it more multi-purpose. The room is more usable for larger gatherings. So I kind of look at that room as more than just adult learning, and I know it says that, but I guess want to make that point.
Yeah, so again, the adult learning classroom is also a large meeting room, and the idea was that it could be used as a digital tech lab as well. So I think right now there's, yes, people have laptops, but there's also the desire for people that want to work on larger screens, or like we saw in Cambridge again, I keep going back to that, but they had the big wall so that you could potentially do other things with it, and it could make it more of a digital creation sort of space. So I think, again, we're in a difficult place because we're talking about, programs and how we're going to use the space, and we're looking into the future, but we also are just kind of trying to define rooms right now. So it's a sort of a hard thing because we don't know exactly what every single space is going to be used for. But we want to make it so that there's the potential of, multiple uses right now, but also how we grow in the future. And I think that there's no question that technology is going to be a big deal, right? And not everybody's got large workspaces at home, and not everyone's got large computer screens at home. And so I think that a digital space, like the adult learning space, right now, yes, you're right, that most of them are doing one or two people. It's a one-on-one, one-on-two kind of situation. But in the past, they did do more classrooms, and we don't know if they're going to go, we don't know, right? Nobody knows. So, but I think also if we can use it for, a digital space, when you look at other libraries that have got digital computer labs, they're not laptops, they've actually got desktops with 27, 30-inch screens. And typically they're pretty actively used by the community at large, but definitely a lot of youth. Because they can come in and two of them can sit there and put their headphones on and play games on a computer screen that's a lot bigger than they have at home, or that they don't have room for two of them at home, right? So I think that, again, that space is not just dedicated to adult learning. It was designed for multiple uses, and also the potential of more of a digital lab, right? Because right now, if you look at the library, they've got the computers set up, but it's really just for adult learning. So the idea is that we would do something like that, make it a bit bigger, but make it open to the community.
Okay. Oh, Andrea?
Hi. A question regarding the servery, which I was happy to see. I know it's not technically yet adjacent to the larger event space, but I'm glad to see it included. A question, in your notes you mentioned that it could be a place for staff to have their lunches at. I'm just wondering if this size is compatible with that, or if this is more intentioned as a serving space, a place to store beverages and whatnot for larger events.
Again, I think we went sort of a little bit back and forth about the idea of having a lunchroom and also a servery. And I think this sort of, again, the placement of it isn't sort of sacrosanct. I think you're never going to it's not going to be a huge building that's got a lot of staff. So having a dedicated staff break room is a pretty big use of space that we could maybe use for something else. Having a kitchen, servery, bar area, whatever we want to call it, that has a microwave and a coffee maker and, dishes and whatever so that people can do events, where the staff could heat up their lunch, the staff could, get a drink out of the, keep stuff in the cooler, whatever, and then either use one of the many common spaces in the building for their lunch, or eat at their desk, or whatever, You're also downtown where, I know when I've worked in office environment, especially with younger workers, they tend to go to coffee shops and they're not eating in the building or at their desk anyway. But I think there's the nice thing about this building versus a normal office environment is that we've got a lot of common space and a lot of, you look at the community space, it's bright, it's, I know I'd rather have my lunch in the community space, which has got lots of light and windows, than be stuck in a little staff room somewhere. But there hasn't been a dedicated staff room. It's more of a area that, whether it's going to be confined in a space or whether it's going to be more open to the public, we don't know yet. But an idea where it's got the sort of elements that we need, place you can store serviceware, but it's open to everybody, including staff.
Two things. Number one, there's the potential for dividers between rooms, right? Instead of solid walls, which would give you options about how to use some of the rooms, for example, and that's something the architects can deal with. The other thing I wondered about was the space for not only the stairs but corridors, whether there's some kind of a building code requirement. Because when I look at these sketches, there's a lot of room taken up with corridors. In a way, it's good to have wide ones, because then if you have art on the walls, people can see it properly, that sort of thing. But a lot of this space is taken up with corridors rather than rooms. So, but it's probably a code requirement, but I don't know.
Again, I think on the main floor, we, the staff group, we talked about that, is, because originally we had another sort of preliminary sketch, and it had actually defined hallways everywhere. And that's where we sort of talked about, can we combine some of the hallways with some of the spaces to make bigger spaces, right? I think upstairs, again, the architect put this together really quickly for us, just so that we'd have something to show you that gives us an idea of what different size spaces look like. And I think he just, in the purpose of this, did a lot of corridors to just connect spaces. But again, if that's something that we're interested in, of having, a more of an open space that rooms come out of or whatever, that sort of can be part of a design brief that we give to the architect when we get to the point of actually isolating what rooms we want. So, but yeah, I mean, I think, when you look at the second floor, there's a lot of corridor space.
Basement, too.
Yeah, and the basement as well, yeah. So again, that's something that we'll note as we go forward. Any other comments before? Yes?
Thank you. When I look at the basement space, it looks like more of a service for the building space, storage and whatnot, Friends of the Library storage. And in our comments, there was like the black box or the music practice room, a room that's a sound room. So, I mean, just imagine if somebody's a guitar player and wants to teach for free at the library but doesn't have a space because there's no sound room. So has that been discussed, or where that location might be?
No, it was the feeling, somehow we got the feeling in our discussions that a recording space sound room wasn't necessarily needed. So is that, but I mean, that is something, is that something that wants to still be on the table? I mean, I think that we saw, again, when we were in Cambridge, how well those two little sound rooms were used. I mean, they're booked almost, every minute that place is open. And what they've basically done there is, it's not a recording studio as in when we see on TV the music recording studios that have got the guy with the soundboard and, Taylor Swift out there recording. But what's needed these days are basically, again, one of those little office spaces that are soundproofed, that have got, that are wired for, you can either bring in your own computer, they've got equipment there, that you can do your podcasts, you can do whatever it is that you need to do that is in a soundproof, good quality recording studio. So again, that's something that we can look at. And do we make, one or two of the small meeting rooms or the other meeting rooms soundproofed enough for that? The black box theater idea. The black box theater idea kind of just got sort of dropped, I guess. And with the idea that, can that happen in one of the meeting room spaces? Like, do we want to, it can't happen in, it's not going to work in a common space. It would have to be one of the meeting rooms that actually is designed so that it can be used as a theater space with, proper soundproofing, proper lighting, movable seating. The needs of that are somewhat different than the needs for just a general meeting room. I mean, they could be used interchangeably, but there's definitely certain requirements that a black box theater needs that a general meeting room doesn't. So is that, something that, I think when I looked over the notes from our last meeting, it was kind of one of those, do we want it, do we not? At the staff level, it was felt that it wasn't particularly important. When I was doing my community interviews for the other project, the Station Gallery, it did come up that, more theater space in town would be nice. The more art space you have, the more arts that happen. and having places that are more, you know, if it's a black box theater but can also be used as a meeting room, is a different sort of psychological thinking on it than if it's a meeting room that can also be used as a theater, right? So it's kind of like the discussion we had with the gallery, the same thing. Is it a meeting room that also has art on the walls, or is it an art gallery that could have the occasional meeting? It's a different way we think about spaces and the different way people that use those spaces use them, especially the arts community. So is having a black box type theater or something that can be used as a theater space in one of the meeting rooms important? Or are we okay with just having the theater space upstairs? But again, that's a different use. I mean, people that are using a theater with a stage are different than someone that's going to do a small, 3-person reading that doesn't, maybe wants people sitting around them, doesn't want to be, distance on a stage. I mean, it's a different type of performance. So I guess it depends philosophically what the community wants, what direction they want to go in terms of providing art space and encouraging artistic creation.
So yeah, I just want to go back to Fern's point about not the black box theater, but the practice rooms. And I wonder if that isn't something we could put in the basement. Like there's a lot of square feet in that basement. And the Friends of the Library, I love them. But I'm wondering if they really need that much storage space, or if that could be a general storage area, and maybe those storage rooms could be practice rooms and or used as those, informal recording studios. But I'm cognizant of the fact that there may be issues about staffing. So that may impact the ability to use those in that way. But it does seem to me that there might be an opportunity there. It strikes me as being easier to soundproof a basement room than soundproof a room on the second floor, for example. I just put that out there, but I know that there could be staffing issues that might be a barrier to that.
Yeah, I think that's a good, I think it's something good to note, and we'll definitely put it on the list. I think the one problem with having sound studios in the basement, typically they do have some tech equipment in there. And so like your point that, do you want it to just be, in a basement where it's not being watched and, somebody could technically, I wouldn't know how to do that, but I'm sure somebody would know how to rip all the tech stuff out of the wall and take it up the back stairs, right? So we don't want to, there's certain things that need a bit of security. So, but all that stuff is and you can work around all that too, right? So, but I think that, if having a soundproof, some sort of recording studios is important, we should definitely make a note of, somehow we're going to incorporate that, whether it's going to be in some of the offices on the second floor, or whether we do want to find a way to incorporate it in the basement. Because definitely, the basement would definitely be more soundproof than the second floor.
Anybody else? It would be nice to if I wanted to give a reading of something creative, which I can't imagine ever doing, but it would be lovely to be in a gallery. That would certainly, you could use a gallery for an intimate sort of presentation like that, and it would be just a very friendly and interesting. And if people were bored with what I was presenting, they could look at the art around me. And I think that would be a good double use. And they would be bored, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think galleries.
Oops. It's flexible. We call it a gallery, but it's still flexible.
Yeah, no, and I think that the gallery space is certainly being thought of that way, that you would still have available for, reading, small performances, the odd meeting, but that's not a black box. No, the black box is a completely different thing.
Yep,
So do we want, I guess the thing is that do we, we talked about the black box actually quite at length at our last meeting. Is that something that is still important to have on the table? And we convert one of the, many meeting rooms that we have into something that is more of a can be used as a black box theater, but also could be used as a meeting if needed. But then we're looking at one of the spaces that is quite a bit larger. Because I'm thinking that, like, to do a, you're going to need, you probably want at least to be able to seat 30, 40 people, which is then getting to be one of the sort of medium-sized meeting rooms, which then takes space away from something else, right? So, I mean, that's the challenge with what we're doing right now, right? Is, really defining what is the most important space, what are the most important spaces to have, right? So we've got, again, not that we're going by this specifically, but like on the main floor, you've got already the common space and a sort of large meeting space. So that's a fairly big space that we can use for a lot of things. Then on the second floor, we've got, again, the maker space, which is a fair size, but you need a good size maker space so that you've got creative space to work. So I don't think that's an overly large space. You do have 2 meeting rooms, which are 230 square feet and 175 square feet, which according to the chart is, can't remember offhand how many people that seats or serves. So, if those together, that's about, if you combine those into one space, that is about 60 people, right? So it's how we play with the space, right? And what do we, and that's the goal of today, is that what do you as a group feel that when we go through this list, which spaces are we totally okay with and we're like, yep, let's move forward with that and we're going to present that to council? And are there other spaces that you potentially want to change the size or scope of, or add something or take it off? Or are we okay with going forward with this sort of general list with the general space configurations or the people occupancy right now, and then we can decide what those spaces are going to be used for during the next stage?
Do you want us to declare our intentions right now? I think this is fine.
Yes.
I'm quite happy with what you have presented, and I think, it's not going to be, as you say, set in stone, so I think, personally, I'm happy with moving forward at this point. The comments have all been interesting, and those will be...
And they'll be all recorded, and yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Barb.
Well, subject to the comments that I already made about, not taking off the teen books out of the picture, I'm looking at that second floor and wondering if you can just squeeze one more small, like office/small meeting room, so you'd have 4. That would be my thought there. Right now, there's 3. Do you need to have a washroom on the second floor? Okay, I wondered about that.
I think that would be the issue if we put things, real occupancy downstairs in the basement, you'd probably have to put a washroom down there as well. I don't know, I'm not a planner and architect, but I'm pretty sure if you've got occupancy down there and people are working, that you might need to have a restroom on that basement level as well.
That's okay. The large meeting area presentation wall, so that's really just open to the public, so anybody that does on the main floor, anyone that does some sort of a presentation is expected to use that space. That's open to everyone that is going to be coming in and out of the building. Is that what I'm seeing?
Generally speaking, yeah. The way it's presented right now is one big open space. Again, there was talk of, do we want dividers so you can close it off? Do you want, dividers add to cost? Dividers have, aesthetically, they're not always nice looking. Sometimes functionally, they're not that great. But do we want, if we do feel we need a meeting room that's closed off, then yes, we'd have to change the configuration and you wouldn't have this nice big bright open space. So it's kind of that cost or that preference between, do we want a nice big open space, do we want a closed in meeting room, I would assume, and again, you know, depends on how people are programming it, if somebody's doing a large meeting, it would be probably not during the same hours that people are just coming and hanging out, but may or may not. Also, I think there's a, you know, this is a building that's going to have multiple uses. And like any building that's got multiple uses, you can easily put on your social media, on the city town website, on the door, that there's a private function today. And that the building is closed for an hour, 2 hours while there's a function. I mean, people, I mean, that's not the ideal thing for a community center, but people do that all the time. Because it's impossible for even a, you know, for-profit developer that's got an event space to be able to accommodate everything every minute all the time. So, and, you know, in a town situation like this, we don't have unlimited funds to have, you know, every space with every little door on it and open concept and everything for everybody. So like where, you know, and that's what we have to decide what's the most important. Like what are we willing to sacrifice? What do we want to ensure happens? And, you know, and again, I think it's the people that would use the big meeting space to know like how often are they going to do something that is going to be a private meeting that, you know, can't be open to the public.
Here we go. So then my question, I guess, again, would be, as you'd mentioned, the gallery may be a meeting space that people can use and have a private meeting. And what about the large meeting room then, where the adult learning is? And that would be set up to allow for those other uses? A meeting that they're not necessarily wanting everyone that walks through the building to be involved in. It's a library. I'm sure that the library doesn't care. They're fine.
Yeah, and I think that's why we've created, you know, the large meeting room with adult learning big enough, and also the gallery is, you know, 615 square feet. So you can set up, I mean, that's not huge. Like if you think of, you know, like we think about the space, the gallery that we saw in Cambridge, I think that was 1,500?
2,500.
How much?
2,500, the gallery,
The gallery was 25?
the one in the library.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big space, right?
It was
So-
too big, really.
Well, depends, yeah.
Well,
I think it's a perfect space for an art gallery,
yeah, I
like
know,
for
it's your
programming out of,
space.
but, no, it's a big space, right? But 600 square feet is still a decent sized space, right? So if you've got a meeting with, you know, you've got somebody that's, you know, a normal sized meeting would fit in there. Even a, you know, small lecture, if you're doing a book reading or something, would probably accommodate that space. And I think that galleries do routinely get used for those kind of purposes. You just don't want to turn a gallery into, you know, have chairs and tables set up there all the time, right?
I just also say there are many other options for meeting spaces in the town. There are several meeting rooms at the Friendship Center, and you can, if you've got a large gathering, of course, there's the 1/3 in the community hall. This will be just another place that people could possibly have large group or medium-sized group meetings. It certainly isn't meant to try to take business away from the Friendship Center either. Those meeting rooms are well used, but they're not full, so I don't think that's an issue.
Sorry, I know I'm talking a lot, but I'm just looking at the upstairs again, and I wonder about, when you're thinking about having a more private meeting space, Fern, maybe it makes sense to combine those two meeting rooms, that 230 square foot one and the 175 square foot one, into one meeting room, so you can have larger meetings on the second floor, but they're in a contained space. So I'm thinking things like book club meetings, or you know, a small poetry reading or something like that. I just find those sort of medium-sized rooms are kind of awkward. So I think it's better maybe to have one bigger one and then a few smaller ones for like individual tutoring and things like that. But just, if you can, like, I just think it might be better just to have a bigger meeting room on that second floor for those bigger groups that might want that privacy, that they don't want to be, and then you can have a little more flexibility too about not having to close off the whole building if somebody wants to have a slightly larger meeting room.
The two meeting spaces would be about the same size as the adult learning meeting room then, yeah.
Again, keeping in mind that we're not sticking to these schematics, but I'm very happy to see that large meeting room space, and I know that's terminology adjacent to the community social gathering space, because I'm a believer in form follows function, and this kind of space really opens up new opportunities in the downtown, like BIA events, for example, or any kind of municipal open house on some topic, whereas right now, most people are going down to the Pyramid Center or the MOC for those kind of closed-in spaces, whereas this open area space is extremely welcoming and non-threatening, a non-threatening way for people to get involved in civic life. So I'm quite pleased by that large space.
I think it also opens up the opportunity, not that, you know, that's what we're talking about right now, but if the town wanted to get into, you know, facility rentals or event rentals, it allows for earned income potential because you could do small weddings or whatever, meetings there, right?
Now, I'm sorry, and perhaps jumping the gun again, but I just had my tour of 14 Church yesterday, and I love the ceiling height and whatnot. Wondering about how high the walls will be, if they'll actually extend the full length up to the rafters, or if they'll be lower, leaving open space above, or just that kind of logistic and how that works with privacy for these meeting spaces.
Both, Flora? I think Grant's on the line, so maybe Grant, maybe you could jump in, because this is a conversation I think we've had a lot of, especially when you think of the first floor. We've always thought of it as being open, you know, open concept. You look at the second floor, it seems a bit more chopped up and there's a lot of walls. But Grant, can you talk to everybody about, you have a lot of visions. And Grant's talked a lot and he's visualized this space, but can you talk to us a bit about the need for walls, fire separation, sprinklering, and then also, as Andrea mentioned, how high would walls have to be?
Well, I guess let me start off by, I'll leave sprinkling to last, and we'll talk about that at the end. But basically, when you take a look at spaces, depends how much privacy you want. Depends on a number of things, because when you take a look at it, and to answer Andrew's question directly, I assume there's going to be some sort of ceiling in there. There's going to be ductwork that runs between the ceiling, drop ceiling, between the floor system, what I call the floor system, and the ceiling itself. I expect there's going to be something within that, and there'd be walls that go up to that. Again, when you take a look at a lot of these rooms, when we talk about the gallery, that's a climate controlled space that has special climate control. Again, when you talk about the washrooms and everything and all that is, to me, would be up to the ceiling, or to the underside of that floor system, so to speak. Again, some of the challenges in the second story, and some people have the ability that were in that space or could view that space. There's basically a 6-foot girder that comes down from the ceiling to where the old ceiling was, right? And now we've exposed that entire girder system. So it's going to be more of a challenge to put those walls to the underside of ceiling or the underside of roof deck in the second floor, because of some of those challenges that we have with closing that girder truss off and kind of properly sealing that. So that to me is, again, to answer the question, yeah, I expect a ceiling of some shape, form, or fashion. There's gonna have to be just dealing with things that we deal with here at the MOC and some of the lessons learned with our other spaces. There's gonna have to be some soundproofing, quite a bit of soundproofing that goes on between these spaces, because where I am and where my office is, I can hear people talking in the next space. So, and I know we do have insulation up there, but our ceiling goes, our walls only go to the underside of ceiling, not underside of roof deck, which causes noise movements across, and same through the same to the ductwork and stuff like that. So judging by what I foresee here of kind of where that's going to end up, we're going to take some extra care and controls to make sure things are properly soundproof throughout, not only with that recording studio part, but when you take a look at these uses in these spaces that we see today. Brent, what was the last piece that you asked me?
Sprinklering.
So sprinklering, we do have the ability to sprinkler. So there are requirements for fire separations. There are going to be requirements for when we talk about fire separations, not only interior and exterior as well. So right now, because of where the property line is to the north wall, to get any windows or to get any openings in that, there's going to be some challenges with that unless we take a look at sprinklering. Do we need to sprinkler a space? No, but then our exit corridors and our egress are a bit longer, and that may cause some challenges as far as design and stuff like that. So sprinkler is something we do have the ability to do, but it does cost money. But again, we do have the ability to put sprinklers in this space if we need to increase fire protection for whatever reason. Typically, it's when we talk about for what those reasons would be again egress. If we want to tighten up our egress, or if we want to have more openings within that north wall. So.
Thanks.
All right, does that answer your question, Andrea? Does anybody else have something, a question, a concern to bring up? John? No? Paul? No. Barb again? No?
Yes to sprinklers, that's all I say. Yes, please put in sprinklers. Let's make this building as safe as possible.
So any other comments, feedback? So what I'm gathering is, and I'll go through the notes afterwards to make sure I'm not missing anything, that we would like another small space. Is that something that everybody is in agreement with, or is it's just Barb? And the idea of having, so is the black box theater something that we want or not want, or I see smiles, I see shaking.
In the write-up, but it's not necessarily what I was focusing on. It was really just a private space where people could have a reading and not be within, like not have to close the whole building down as you're suggesting, or use that large space because they want it to be a more intimate space. So it can be the adult learning or the gallery. So those things are fine, but the sound room is something different. I think that might be a handy thing to have.
And I think that's, a relatively easy thing to add within the constraints of the configurations of what we have here, right? Just sort of when it gets to the design stage, again, just saying that we want, one or two, whatever, offices or smaller spaces soundproofed. Anything else? Are we okay to sign off on this as a group, basically? Or do you feel that you'd rather this go back to the staff and then back to you before it goes to council? Or are we generally okay with?
The 8-table room, the 6-table room, and the 4-table room, was that noted to be something maybe combined to eliminate? We've got all of these spaces. Is that a note that was made?
So Jen's be taking notes and I'll.
Okay.
Yeah,
Pardon?
They want to change the motion.
And just for, and for full transparency, the way it's listed, for full transparency, the way it would have been listed was, you could have gone through and like listed edit by edit by edit by edit. Then
Yeah,
if you find that to be tedious, I'm having Jenna just make something a bit more generic.
All right, you tell me what I'm supposed to say.
Well, she'll type it up and she'll put it on the screen even.
Oh, all right, how exciting, all right.
Well, we can do it in a modern council meeting.
I know, wow.
We pride ourselves in efficiency and transparency here.
Okay.
So.
All right. Brent, your shirt is doing awful things. It's scary.
So the staff in this building like to watch council meetings, and they're going to take up the flex to buy me a couple council shirts.
Okay.
They're solid.
Yes. Oh,
Right.
no,
It doesn't matter solid or checked.
no, it's just, it's terrible.
Come on, hold your hand. That's the consensus.
Okay, thank you. All right, that admin 07-2025 downtown service location review draft space needs analysis report be received for discussion, semicolon, and that the downtown services location review committee recommends the draft space needs analysis for 14 Church Street be referred to council with minor edits made by the committee at the February 25th, 2025 meeting. So what now? We need somebody to move that motion, I guess. Andrea. Seconded by Paul. All in favor? Right, motion carried.
Thank you. That's
right.
great.
So now I guess we will, you'll let us know when we need another meeting?
And so, path forward, again, given that the edits are minor, I'm sure Angela will update her memo in a certain way and we'll update this chart as well. My plan is to take almost the exact same package to council on March 18th. And with any luck, council will do the same thing. They'll maybe make some minor edits, but then bless it to move on to concept phase. And that's where I truly think the heavy lifting starts to begin. We'll have A-Link do a proper concept design. We'll go through that same process of internal vetting with staff, and then we'll bring it back to the committee, and that's where you really start doing some of the work of, that's where we start moving walls and asking hard questions. And I would expect at that point in time that'll be the point in time where we'll have to bring A-Link to the table here, because they'll have to explain building code in more detail than, both myself, Angela, and even Grant. Like Grant does a great job of explaining the building code, but the architects, they design and they have a rationale and they have their own kind of preferences or biases towards the code. So
Great.
I would think probably another 6 weeks give us, and we'll see another meeting, I think.
All right, so I guess adjournment is next. So would somebody like to move that this meeting of Downtown Services Location Review Committee be adjourned at something 4:40 p.m.? Anybody moving it? Oh, John, thank you. All right. I guess we're all in favor. All right, thank you. That's it.
Thank you.